Alrighty, good morning everyone, and again thank you so much for showing up early. And I think usually I might just start with some important announcement just to give you some look ahead about what's going to happen in the week, maybe while your classmates are still arriving. Quickly, I'll take the trial attendance maybe on the halfway through, so you can stretch your leg a little bit, just for 1 or 2 minutes. We'll do that a little bit later, don't worry. I'll give you a cue. Just to tell you that your priority for at least until tomorrow or Wednesday should be to try to finish Lab 0 Part 1, especially the tutorial videos I put up over there. I think that's just a Part 1 series. I know they are not that small number, but it's really with the purpose to really guide you through the review on the OOP. So please be patient to actually study that. And I think about the Eclipse, there could be some confusion there. For the Eclipse program that we're going to use, you definitely have to stick to Eclipse. You cannot use, for example, IntelliJ other program for your project, because otherwise you might have issue when you submit the programs for grading. So for Eclipse, there are 2 things you may want to consider. Number 1, you may want to install the Eclipse on your machine. And for that one there, you might just get the latest version. So if you follow the link I gave to you on the Lab 0 Part 1 instruction, you should be able to find it. On the other hand, when we actually hold your programming tests, we're actually going to have your test on the lab machines in the Williams Moore Center. That one there is slightly older version. However, the look and feel should be almost identical, so you shouldn't worry too much. However, I would suggest try this one as well. I also included a link for the remote lab for you. And one thing I want to emphasize again, part of the initial step in the Lab 0 Part 1 is for you to get an EECS account. It will be mandatory for you to get an EECS account. They changed the policy this year. Before, maybe back in your first year, you can simply go to WSC if you ever went there and simply log in as a default user. Not anymore. You need to actually have some EECS account in order to log in. Otherwise, you cannot take the test. Okay, please. You still got lots of time to set it up. Tutorial video and PDF guide. Let me just, I'm not going to go over them. I will wait for your questions, maybe during the office hour. That's something you should really walk you through, study on your own. So if you go to our lecture site over here, let me show you again where they are. You can see under the required written notes, you can see one of them is about inferring classes methods from JUnit tests. That's one. That one there is not very long. I would say go over them, and then when you actually receive lab number 1 this Friday, you will see the immediate applicability of that. Okay, that'll be number 1. And number 2 will be the programming pattern you will rely on for both your labs and also the programming test. And as you will see later in the labs and also in the programming test, there will be a strict policy saying that you cannot use any Java library like an array list or linked list that you may have used before in the first year. They are very handy, very useful. However, I think in this course, it's good for you to learn the best by developing everything from scratch using primitive array. So that'll be the policy. So that's why you really want to go over this document here, make sure everything is good. And Lab 0 tutorial video also guide you through the pattern as well. So you definitely will get prepared for this pattern. Okay, so that's about the PDF. And then, okay, about the scheduled lab, which will take place tomorrow. Since there is no scheduled test tomorrow, don't worry. So that means it's going to be optional Q&A. For the first 2 weeks, because you're still completing your, at least for this week, you're still completing your Lab 0. It's self-guided, but I will be there myself. No TA, but myself. If you want to speak to me about Lab 0, any part about the course, just come. And finally, I also got my office hour, as usual. You can check out your syllabus for the exact time. Do you guys have any concern about the course so far before I dive into OOP? Yes? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes, so I would say if you can drop by my Zoom office hour today, 4 p.m., drop by and then we'll sort it out together. Awesome, no problem. Yeah, guys, if you got any login problem, don't leave it to yourself, just reach out to me. If I cannot help, I'll refer you to the tech team of the EECS department, all right? Any other question or concern? All right. Awesome. All right, so today I really want to talk more serious review. I really plan to do the review for today, Wednesday, and possibly part of next Monday, and then we'll move on to the next topic, which is exceptions. That's also a very exciting topic to learn about. All right, let me start with this. So we really want to have a separation of concern. This will be the kind of style of programming you will see throughout the labs and also the programming test. Okay? So let's go over a little bit concept, and then I'll summarize visually as well. Think about back in your 1022, 1021, and possibly 1720 as well. So you basically got several components in your project. Number one would be model components. I didn't teach you guys for the first year, so I'm not too sure, but I would say typically you will only concentrate on one Java class and possibly two, maybe no more than two. But I think later in the programming tests and labs, I want you to deal with more than two Java classes working together that can really have you practice the essence of OOP. But just remember, whenever you see model, that's really where the intelligent part is in your project. We'll go more through it. And just some example classes over here. And then there will be, okay, once you get your model components, you want to somehow test to see whether it works. There are different flavors of testing you can do. And I will show you two today, okay? And one of them will be just to have a controller, for example, right? If you got for example, if you're in 1022, you actually will get some activity class to actually control the apps, right? But let's forget about the controller that you actually work with in the first year. What we want to do is to do something similar to what usually is called a tester. And a tester has two kinds. One would be you can actually do system.out.println at the console. That's one kind. The other kind is what we have to focus on for this course. I'm going to show you the console tester only one time, only today. Later on, I'm going to focus more on the JUnit test, in which case you have to know exactly the expected value is, and then to compare that with the actual value of the method, and then try to see if you get a green bar. That'll be the idea. But we'll see. All right. In Java, we may define more than one classes. I think for your lab number 1 or 2, you have to deal with about 3 or 4 classes. I think that's good. But once you get to the later year, let me give you some look ahead. For example, if you go to 3311, the software design class, the course, you might just have to deal with dozens of classes working together. So we're definitely trying to train you along the way. Okay, we got one more moment. OOP, let's say you want to use, okay, we'll talk about the difference between class and objects, right? Templates versus instances. And at the runtime, we want to create as many objects as necessary. They will kind of work together by calling methods. That's something I will show you throughout the course. Okay. All right, that's a very important slide just to make some transition from the first year. All right, let me visualize it just to summarize, and then we'll move on. Okay, over here, so that's kind of the diagram. I don't quite remember if I showed this diagram in lab 0. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Anyway, basically, you're going to see one package called a model. This is where the intelligent part is. You will also see console apps, system and out.println. Also, you will see another package called JUnit test. I'm going to reproduce all of them today, so you will see exactly how they work. And very quickly, in the model package, you're going to get classes, and each class may have methods. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to make the notes available to you, so don't worry about copying them, right? Just save your time. And for the methods, we're also going to talk about today, you got either constructor, accessors, mutators, right? So these are the 3 kinds of methods you can define. At this level, you will almost always be told exactly what methods you will need to define. However, later, just remember, when you go beyond this course, you might be more responsible for inferring exactly what classes you do. That's more like a design process, but not for this course. Okay, let's see this. And accessors, there will be some return statements, and for the mutator, no return statement, like a void method. And then there should be no system.out.println in the model package. Whenever you want to really print something to the console, remember the following principle. You have to define some system.out.println in the main method in the console apps package. Okay, just remember that. All right, so that's something. Sometimes you may have to read some input from the keyboard. Okay, that's something you will see in the lab 0. And for JUnit test, we're gonna see a little bit in the first 2 weeks, but in week number 3 or 4, we're also gonna dive deeper into JUnit testing, especially when we learn about the equals method in Java. That's something we'll see. Right, you're going to compare expected versus actual, and then, okay, and etc. Assertions. You're going to learn about different kinds of assertion. I'll show you a few today to get an idea. Do you guys have any immediate question about this diagram over here? It's a very quick walkthrough, but just you can definitely look at the detail as well. Any questions? You might be wondering, why don't we put all the classes into the default package? In practice, if your software project grows big, you definitely want to have the separation of concern to put things into different package. Each package will serve different purpose. That will be the good practice to have. Even though sometimes you may have only a single classing model, but you have in your mind, your project might grow gradually, right? As you evolve your projects. So model package should really be a standalone one. Okay, hearing none. So when you see the notes today, you can definitely look a little bit more detail into it. Just always remember the principle and try to see how you can practice that when you get the questions. All right, so what I want to do now is to talk about object orientation a little bit. And remember last time I kind of suggested you should really study up to slide 13. I will highlight certain points over there, but I wouldn't just read off the slides. I'll talk about the principle of object orientation, some example, and then I'm going to go back to Eclipse. I want to develop some example today and possibly Wednesday together with you. I think that'll be the best. Okay, object orientation. Let me just go a little bit slides here. Okay, there's a diagram I'm going to go over in detail. There are 3 stages over here. I would say for 2030, you basically start with stage number 2. For stage number 1, usually you don't really have to observe exactly what you need to create. You're kind of spoon-fed about what's to be created with this code, but you should really know the whole picture. And then, okay, so let's talk about 3 stages, and I'll give you 2 examples. We want to observe about how the real-world entities behave. Entities are very, very general concept. Desk, chair, light bulb, iPad, anything you see, like an object, anything that's tangible. Well, even in untangible things, you can also model it if necessary. Second stage, once you observe, you may get some observation. You're going to somehow turn the observation into Java. Sorry. And we're gonna turn into Java, and that's called a model process, right? You're gonna get several classes. I'll go to the classes later. And for classes, you have basically got 2 components. One would be the attributes. Think about how you may characterize entities in a particular class. That's number 1. And also, how do the entities behave? Whenever they behave, it's like a verb. In that case, it will be methods. Finally, we got, and here we're going to execute the program by instantiating objects and also call methods upon them. That'll be the process. Let me give you a little bit more concrete example over here. Think about what's happening is this. Let's say we got one person, let's say his name is Jim, Jonathan, and also we got 1 point over here and 1 point over here. So we got 4 entities in total. Let's say your job right now is to somehow turn your observations about these 4 entities into Java classes. That's the job, right? So here, I can only give you some general principle. I would say, once you practice enough, you'll just get a very natural feel about how things should work. But let's try, just from the beginning, okay? Well, apparently you can see these 2 entities are more or less similar. Of course, they share some commonality. They also have something that's different, but they're more or less similar. You wouldn't really characterize, for example, Jonathan together with this point to be a single kind, right? Hopefully you wouldn't do that, right? So number 1, we will have a consensus. These 2 should belong to the same category. And these 2 should belong to another category, okay? And what I will do is I'm going to put a name. So for example, this one here, it's just called a person. And this one is going to be called point. So these 2 entities of kind point, they're going to share something in common. They're also going to have something that's different. Similarly for these 2 as well, but they are different templates, okay? What's more is also important. So entities, let me just do a little bit more. So let's say Jim, Jonathan, let's say this one is P1, this one is P2. All right, so entities we got Jim over here, we got Jonathan over here, we got P1 over here, we got P2 over here, right? Let's say these 2 persons, we want to know what should they share in common. These are the so-called attributes. What kind of attributes that both of them bear? Well, let's say for our purpose, apparently both Jim and Jonathan, you can measure their weights and heights, right? Why don't we do that? So I'm going to say they have weights, and also they have heights. And what about P1 and P2? Their locations are completely different, but they do share something in common abstractly. They should have like an X coordinator and also Y coordinator, something like that, right? So we should put X and Y. What I have put down so far as the attributes, that's something every object of that particular template would have. However, the specific values you have the attributes might be different. So these are two things, right? So attributes over here, let me just give you some extra notes. Attributes will be shared by all person objects. Okay? And similarly, for attribute as well, they'll be shared by all the points of point class or point template. And let's think about what kind of changes for inquiry informally. Changes mean how can they change their attribute value? By the way, for Jim here, apparently his height will be larger than the height of Jonathan. And possibly the weights, maybe he may have which is way heavier, let's say. Okay? In that case, how can they change? For example, their weights might change. For example, Jim might just get, for example, a little bit fatter, like that. Right? In that case, of course, his weight is going to change. So let's just have 1. I'll put it over here. So this would be maybe gain the weights. In which case, his weight value is going to increase, of course. And always they got just weight and height, but just the measure itself might be different. And what about inquiry? And the one we can do would be, for example, get a BMI. The body mass index, maybe you have seen that in the first year. If you haven't, I'm going to talk about it when I get to Eclipse. And what about P1 and P2 over here? Well, if you have done 1025, the math, like a linear algebra, you can definitely change, right? You can maybe say increase the X or decrease the Y, and etc. Okay. What about inquiries? You can say, for example, given the points itself, I want to know what the distance is from the origin. Right. And one thing to see. Let's say I got this distance method somehow implemented in Java. By calling the same method, either say p1.getDistance versus p2.getDistance, even though I'm using the same method, but the outcome will be different. Why? There's a keyword I'm looking for. Yes, go ahead. The points are different, but very good, thank you. Let me just put it here. If you look at p1. Let's say distance, it's not exactly a proper name, but let's just put it here. And p2.distance. Number one, you can see it's exactly the same method that's being called over here. And as you correctly pointed out, the objects over here are different. But let me make it a little bit more formal, which people talk about. We set the p1 here and the p2 over here. They're the so-called context objects. Just remember, whenever you want to trace the object-oriented program, context is the important thing to know. If the context is different, even though you're calling the same method, the outcome may be different. Okay, very good. All right, so that's about this diagram here. I want to go over with you. Just make sure you just understand. For this course, we're going to focus more on this part over here. And then we're going to see much more about how things actually might work together. You might be wondering, how did you draw these boxes to trace? That's something there's some principle I'll give to you as well on the halfway through. Okay. All right, before I leave the diagram, is there any question about the process over here? It's really meant as a review from first year. Yes? They're also different, yes. Good. That's something we'll definitely see on the Eclipse today as well. But since you asked, let me put it out. Following the same principle, for example, here we got Jim here, we got Jonathan here. So if I say Jim dot, for example, BMI versus Jonathan dot BMI. Again, you can see it is the same method BMI that's being called. But now the context object here, Jim versus Jonathan, they're different. So they may be the same, but if they happen to be just the same measure, but in this case, of course not. They will be different. Yeah, very good. All right, any questions about this before I move on? Okay, let me just see if there's anything else I need to go over. Oh, I think I'll go over 2 more slides and I'll definitely dive into Eclipse. Okay. All right, let me go back to the slide. So guys, I think up to 13, I pretty much cover everything. The remaining part is just more like a general concept you can definitely go through. If you got any part that you don't really understand, please reach out to me. So this is where we went up to 13 over here. Oh, one more thing I can mention briefly for you. This may be the only one time I'll talk about how you can turn from English, like an informal description, into Java classes. Again, you wouldn't really do that in this course, but I think just for your knowledge, let's do it quickly. I'll give you some general principle. You want to identify the critical nouns and also the critical verbs in any problem description. This is some practice you can try to do when you see the 5 lab instruction. You'll see, why did Jackie actually turn the problem description into these classes? You can think about it. Would you do it differently? If you would, come and talk to me. We can discuss. Okay. Let's just take one example. Let's say example number 1. I'll leave example 2 for you. Okay. Let's do some very blind analysis. Let's just identify all the nouns. Points, plane, by their assigned distances, and also x, y axis, point toward any direction, and then interest in knowing the distance. I think distance is already there between them, right? That's kind of the nouns, okay? So the principle is some nouns may be turned into classes. Some nouns may be turned into attributes. And some nouns may be turned into accessors, like a get methods. Okay, we'll get there in just a moment. What about the verbs? And the verbs, let's try to see where they are, right? So here, may move arbitrarily towards any direction. So I would say, we can either just move itself, or we can move arbitrarily towards any direction. So this part will tell you either move up, down, left, or right. So this one, verbs usually will be turned into mutators or setters. Method that will actually change the attribute value. Right? That's pretty much the nouns and verbs. However, you don't necessarily have to turn every one of them into something. You don't have to. Sometimes maybe they can be combined. So it turns out we don't really need the plane. Somehow you can think about here the plane, also x and y. These 3 parts over here can just be the x and y attributes. And then, since we talk about different points, different entities, in that way we can just have a classical point. So this is a class. And these are attributes, and what else? And the point is already just an instance, and direction over here. In this case, we can simply ignore, disregard the direction. We don't necessarily need to have a single attribute called direction. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe. Okay. Finally, what about the verbs over here? So the only thing we have is to move. So now, since it can be arbitrary direction, we can say move up, move down, move, I don't know, east or west, something like that. Right? By changing the value for x and y for the points. That's kind of the exercise you will have to do beyond this course to really design your own software. But I would say that one is still a little bit abstract. So I would say it's not suitable at this level. But I just want to let you know. That's something you have to do later. Okay? For those of you who want to do some extra exercise, so as I said, for each lab I'm going to release, look at the informal description, which I normally include. Think about what classes and methods and attributes you may want to include from your own design. And then, once you see the JUnit test cases I gave to you, that hints on my design, you want to compare the two to see which one you like more. And we can have some discussion as well. That's optional exercise for you. Any questions about this? All right. Of course, it's a very simple passage over here. I can give you some idea. Yeah, just let me finish this. I'll take a question. Give me a moment. Oh, sorry, let me finish this one, and then I'll take your question, sorry. So when I was teaching 3311 software design a few years ago, the end of semester project we gave to the student, we gave them about 30 pages of English description. It turns out they will need between 20 to 40 classes to really interacting together. That's kind of the thing you would like to do later. Yes, your question, please. Yeah, okay, good question. Yeah, the question was, let's say I'm looking at a noun. How can I decide whether it should be a class or should be an attribute? Let's say, okay. I would say if the noun itself is more or less declaring some kind of like a template for different instances, then that noun should be turned into maybe a class. For example, if I look at the points over here, that one is kind of obvious because we might get many points. Each point is like an instance. So that means we need to have a general template for that all the points. So that's why this should be a class. Yeah, there will be some rule, some informal rule. And on the other hand, let me just, for completeness, X and Y axis, of course, you may create one class called X axis and another class called Y axis. It might be possible, but it might be overkill. It may not be necessary. So that's why we only turn X and Y into the two attributes in the class called point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's good. And I think what I will do now is I'm going to go over to Eclipse, but before that, let me just give you a summary page over here. I think this page, I'm going to come back to here on Wednesday after we have done the Eclipse exercise. I'll make it available to you. Take a look before Wednesday, and then we'll go over that as the first thing. But let's do programming right away. Okay. One last thing. What should you read after today's class? I would suggest the Eclipse example I'm going to develop is a small one, but I think it's very self-contained and cover many things. It's going to cover almost every concept from here until slide 49. Let me just go there first. And then I'm going to switch to Eclipse. So your reading before Wednesday, or possibly finish that by the end of this week, would be all the way until 40, almost there. And then, of course, I might highlight some of them, maybe on Wednesday as well. I want to dedicate today to just the Eclipse example. We can learn many things from there. Okay, so slide 49. That'll be the last one. Okay. I'll put it here, so when you see the iPad notes today, you will see. So the reading for you will be up to and including slide 49. I'll try to highlight certain important points with you, maybe on Wednesday. But for now, let's now do Eclipse. Okay. And then we'll do attendance possibly maybe 9:15. Let's do maybe around that. But let's now do a little bit programming first. Okay, so let's now do it. And anytime, if necessary, I'll switch back to iPad as well. I do have some screenshots there. Okay, that's good. Okay, so assuming that you already installed Eclipse on your machine, invoke it. 2022-06, that's the latest version, I believe. And then, let's wait a bit. You can also try the Eclipse on the remote labs on the EECS server. Okay, so you want to browse to certain workspace, any folder on your machine. For example, for me, I just go to desktop under workspace, and then I got EECS2030. Okay, I'll just open that. Okay, so that's, I will say launch. Okay, very good. Oh, sorry. Let me get it back. I'll try to maximize it. There we go. All right, so let's now create a new project. I think that what I'm doing now is more like a simplified version of your Lab 0. Don't think of it as like a replacement. Think about it like a motivation of what you will learn in greater details in Lab 0. Go to File, and New Java Projects, right? And then give a name. Right now I call that just people. Okay? Usually the name of a class should be singular, not plural. That's a naming convention. You wouldn't get penalized by having a bad name for the classes, but you're just making your collaborator confused. Okay? Okay, people is good for the project, and then I'm going to say, don't change anything else, say finish. Okay, very important, which is also mentioned in the lab, make sure you do not click on this. If you did, uncheck it. If you already checked it and created a project, please create a new one. That will run you into trouble later. Okay, so make sure don't check this box and say don't create. Really important. Okay. For your programming test and lab, usually you're already given a project created for you, but for your own endeavor, you may want to do some extra work yourself. Just make sure you don't create the module file. Okay. Yeah, I do apologize for the font size here, but once I put on the editor, it will be visible, or I can make it even bigger. Okay, let's now try to do the separation of concern. Remember we got over here, oh, I'll get back there. Remember we talked about the three, right? We got model, we got JUnit tests, we got console apps, right? Let's now do that. Exactly what I just said. So what I will do, right click on the projects, and then I'll say new package, model, the intelligent bit for the projects. And new package, JUnit tests. Another one, let's call that console apps. At the moment, it wouldn't make sense to really create anything under tests or console apps because we haven't got any model yet to test on, right? So now in the model package, I'm going to right click and say new class. And for today, I'm only going to create one single model class. But as we go through the semester, we'll see more, especially in your lab exercise. Okay, let's call that just person. And that's one of the templates we talk about. And then, okay, you might be wondering, should we click on this one option over here called the main? Do we need a main method in the model class? No, very good. Remember the principle. You only put the main method for system.out.println in the console apps, not in the model, not in the JUnit test. Just remember, all right? Okay, I'm gonna say finish. Okay, let me now. Okay, do you guys find the font size suitable? Okay, just especially for, you want to make it bigger? Absolutely. And also for you guys' information, how can you make it larger on your computer? Go to Preferences, and then you can type on the search bar just font. And then just go under Java editor text. Okay, let me make it 36. Hopefully that's okay. Do you think this might be okay? And usually I would suggest there's another font you may want to adjust as well. Under debug and then console font. That one there we may want to do as well. That one there I'm going to make it 36. Okay, and then apply and close. We'll need that console a little bit later. Okay, person. Well, we agreed before that we're going to have two attributes, height and the weight. And just for now, let's remember the following principle. Let me write it down for you. When you try to declare different methods or attributes, I will try to see if we have time to explain the rationale for this, but it's kind of also beyond the level of this course. But whenever you declare attributes, they should be private. And when you declare methods, there are two cases. If they are helper methods, and we'll talk about helper methods hopefully on Wednesday, then they should be private. And if they are the methods you really want other classes to really call upon, they should be public. Okay. It's a if they are to be called or to be used by other classes. In that case, they should be public. Otherwise, you cannot call. That's kind of the principle. Let's follow this. And you don't really have to know the rationale, but if I ever have time, I will definitely try to explain that to you. It's something called information hiding or encapsulation. We can get there a little bit later. For now, but would you be penalized if you didn't follow this principle? I would say no. As long as your program can compile and pass all the test cases, I'm happy as a grader. But I would say this is a good practice to really follow. All right? All right. Make it more centralized. Good. All right, let's come back here. Yeah, guys, again, don't worry if you miss any notes from the class or any verbal remark, it's always recorded. Good. Okay, let me declare some attributes for us, and let me write some comments for you. Attributes, right? So these are shared by all instances of person. Let me just maximize this. Every person object has the following attribute that we're going to declare. However, each instance of person might have different value for their attributes. Jim and Jonathan both got weights, but Jim's weight may be lower. Jonathan's weight might be higher, right? It makes sense. Let's now declare that. And question for you guys. Private first. And what should be the type for the weight? Double? Double is good. Why not integer? Yeah, exactly. I would say usually when you actually want to declare data type of your attribute, it's more like a design choice. There is not really right or wrong. You have to think about what is more suitable for your application. If you're making the assumption that all the weights and heights will be truncated for their fractional part, in that case, go with integer. But since we talk about, in this case, let's just go normal. You can easily see fractional part in your weights and heights, so that's why we use double. And we don't, in this course, we don't need to distinguish between float or double. I would say always use double. You're not going to run into trouble. Okay? Double, the type. And there is some implicit assumption in kilograms. That's just assumption. Yes? Oh, float. I would say the difference between float and double is about the capacity itself for the data type. So when you got really, really, really large numbers, that might just be able to store into double, but not float. But for this course, I don't think we'll really run into that situation. The number is not that big. It's not really for the purpose of that. So that's why I said for this course, just to be safe, who knows, maybe sometimes I'll test you with very large number, in which case float wouldn't be able to handle that. So just always use double. But I think there's a big question here. So maybe beyond this course, if you're programming for embedded system, let's say, for embedded device, not necessarily using Java, but maybe C, in that case, choosing the right data type to really fit just enough, that's important. Yeah, but not for this course. Good. Okay, another one, let's say private, double, let's say the heights. And let's make the following assumption as well, just make our calculation of BMI easier. Let's say it's always in meters. I know this sounds a little bit weird. You wouldn't say I'm 1.72 meters, but just for the purpose of demonstration. So we don't need to do any conversion for now. All right, so these are the two attributes. Any questions so far? Don't be too surprised for your lab number, or your subsequent labs. You may have to sometimes go maybe between 5 to 10 attributes for single objects, okay? And knowing, I'll get to you. Knowing the objects, I think that declaring objects within your lab or programming task is completely your freedom, okay? So I think it's more like a design choice. Just the class name should be fixed. But how many attributes you want to have, and also what should be their type, is kind of up to you. I will talk more about it. Question? Yeah, it's a very good question. Do we need another attribute, possibly a string, for the name? Yes, if we're doing a very robust application, I agree. But just for illustration, let me just forget about it for now. I agree. Yes. And another thing too, as you will see, I think a very important part for you to really program OOP, to really master that, is to know how to trace your OOP program. The way to really trace object creation is by including all the attributes in a single box, which I will show to you. So that means the more attributes you might have, the larger box you may have to draw, right? So that's why I'm only including 2, just for illustration today. Yeah. All right. All right, so let's now, that's about, let me do one more thing. And then I do have a question for you. Oh, you know what? Let's say that's the simplest class you can get without any methods. When I say methods, I mean either constructor, mutators, or accessor, nothing, just that. Okay. Amazingly, I can already start creating things myself. Let's now do that. So let me just do console application just for once, just to show to you. Let's have a class over here. Let's call that tester. And then this time we need the system out of print line. So that's why I will choose the main method. I will say finish. Okay, so now we got 2 classes, right? But they are in different packages. Okay, so now how do I create an object, right? So that's something I assume you guys kind of know from the first year. Let's try. Type of the objects, person, and then also let's say Jim is assigned to. Sometimes if the class is actually from another package, you may have to import it exactly. So that's why Eclipse will actually suggest the hints to you. So you're going to choose import. So you can see import model.person. Another way to get around, you don't want to say every time you introduce a new class into model, you're going to write this line. May not be so desirable. You can do is something called wildcard. Put a star here. Star here simply means I want to import all the model classes. So I don't need to change this line ever. Which one do you want to use? I would say it depends. If you know that you're going to use every class from the model package, one single line. But sometimes you may want to indicate whoever is reading your source code that I'm importing just these classes from the model. Then you may want to be more explicit, like what I did. I'll leave the choice to you. Okay, Jin, new, okay, person, like that, okay. Number 1, you can see there's no right underline in either this class or this class. That means everything is good. It compiles, good. However, here's my question. I did not declare any method in the person class. Why would it allow me to do this? I don't have a, yeah, you're right. I don't have a constructor here. That's exactly the point. You can see, let me go back here. In the person class, I do not have any constructor. But why could I create a new person? Because whenever you have a new keyword, that means you're calling a constructor. But there was no constructor defined over here. That's the question, really. Yeah, at the very back, please. Yeah, very good. Java automatically gives you some default constructor. What does it do? Yeah, it will set all the attributes to default value. Let's take a look quickly. Okay, I do want to illustrate one point here. That's kind of like a common mistake. What I will do is I'm going to say, after this, by the way, sysout, S-Y-S-O-U-T is a shortcut in Eclipse. Do that, control space, you'll write out system out the print line for you. Let me just print out Jim. Oh, by the way, what is this line going to do? Is it going to print out, I'll give you choices. Is it going to print out the weights of Jim? Is it going to print out the heights of Jim? Or is it going to print out all the attribute values of Jim or something else? It's going to print out the address. Okay, that's what you guys want to say? Good, very good. Yes, it's going to print out the address. However, there is something, it's not necessarily always correct. Let me make it accurate here, but we'll talk about it once we talk about equals method or inheritance. Given that the toString method has not been overridden in the person class, this one here is going to be address. However, if I choose to redefine or override the toString method, I can choose this line here to print out, rather than address, I'll print out something else. That's something you can customize. But for now, you can remember that's just address for now. Okay. What I want to show you is another very important point, which is called the breakpoint and debugger. Right? That's something I also walk you through in detail in Lab 0. Please make sure you learn about debugger. It's so important. Okay, so what I want to do now, you can see the blue panel over here, right? I'm going to put the breakpoint line number 8 over here. That means next time when I launch my, let me just let's say without the breakpoint, beg your pardon. Let me just go back to Package Explorer and then right-click on the tester. I'll say run as Java application. And then let's see what's going to be the output. Yeah, you guys were exactly correct. That's the address. Basically, just give you some address over here, right? The absolute value for the address is not important. You don't need to memorize it. However, you ought to know whether the addresses between two objects of person, they are the same. That's the only thing you need to know, the relative concept. Yes? Yeah. When I say default, that means default is you don't need to declare that. It's just there, implicitly. Okay, so let me make it clear here. I'll try to summarize as well. This can be a little bit potentially confusing. Thinking this way, I'll make a comment over here. When no constructors are declared here, the default constructor will be available implicitly. Yeah, implicitly simply means you don't see that, but you can use it. Okay, good. I'll make sure I will spell it correctly. There we go. Okay, and of course, default constructor is going to just assign all the attribute value to be default value. Okay, let me now do this together with you. If you go back to the tester here, and without the breakpoint or without the debugger, I will just execute from top to the bottom. That's what I got over here. What I want to do now, I want to say I want to inspect about how the gem object over here has been created. Okay, what I can do is I can set a breakpoint over here. That's double click. You can see there's a blue point over here. That's called a breakpoint. That means next time when I launch the debugger, the execution is going to pause over there. From that point, I can choose to execute line by line, or I can choose to skip, or I can choose to step into another method call. That's something a little bit more advanced, which we'll see later. But for now, step over one by one. What you got to do is let's go back to the project over here. Tester, right click, and then you can say debug as. Not rather than run as, debug as, Java application over here. And then I'm going to say switch. All right, just wait a bit. And when you actually look at your Eclipse, pay attention to around here. I know it's a bit small, but what you will see is there is one bug button here. It's called the perspective. So we are now being switched to the debug perspective, meaning that everything we see here is relevant to debugging purpose. On the other hand, if you want to go back to the editor mode, you can click on the J. This is a Java perspective. If you go back there, this is the old Java perspective. So you got two perspectives over here in the Eclipse, just to remember. And there is a no-no you should remember. Don't try to edit your Java code while you're running the debugger. That will actually cause some inconsistency for your Java project. Just remember, okay? But of course, the best way to remember is when you do it once, you remember the consequence, right? That'll be the best. Me too. I learned it the same way. Let's go back to debug over here. Okay, so now I'm in the debug perspective. Now I'm pausing over here, okay? If I, let me show you, you got variables. I think the two things you want to look at will be variables and expression. You can see the tutorial or the Lab 0 for more detail. But let's see on the variable. This is how you should really understand the breakpoint. When the breakpoint, you can see this line here is also being highlighted by the breakpoint here. That tells you we are now at the point of execution right before executing this line. So that means this gem over here has not been even declared. That's why under variables, gem is not there. Right? Just need to understand. And let me just do the first time. There is one icon over here. If you move your mouse over, it's called step over. If I say step over, it is going to just execute this line only. I want you to watch the change around over here under variables. If I say step over here, you can see now we got Jim, right? Because we have executed this line. And we are now in line number 9, right before we execute this printout, right? And one thing to see, if you expand the Jim over here, you can see we got heights and weights, the attributes, right? And Jim has object-specific value for the attribute 0.0, 0.0, because it's default constructor. Everything's default, right? One more thing. And if I say step over again, you can see now we got the address that being printed out, right? That's the final outcome to the console. It's a very simple demonstration about how to use debugger. Of course, in this course, I want you to really get used to it. I know initially you might find that maybe it's just much easier. I put lots of print statement in my model classes and try to see what's printed out. I agree. That's what you're tempted to do. But you really want to train yourself to use debugger as much as possible. Once your software becomes very giant, debugger is the only way to go, not print statement, not. Okay. And try to reproduce at least what I'm doing here. If you're not really new to debugger, if you're not very familiar with debugger, if you need extra help, come on Tuesday, tomorrow. I'll show you in the lab. Right. Okay, so that's about this. And I want to show you one more thing in the tester. So what I want to do now is I want to stop the debugger. Make sure you always terminate it, and then go back to the Java perspective. I want to do one more thing here. Let's say I want to create another person object. I haven't really visualized the object for you. I'll do that in just a moment. Jonathan? Okay. Can somebody tell me what you think the outputs will be to the console? Anyone? Okay, go ahead. There'll be one address for Jim, the other one for Jonathan. Will they be the same address? You think no? Do you think it will be the same address? Why not? How did you figure? Good. It will be stored in different parts of memory, but how did you know they will be stored in different parts of memory? How did you see from the program over here? Which keywords did you actually see that tells you that should be the case? The new keyword. Exactly. Brilliant. That's good. So if you guys see over here, just remember whenever you actually see a new keyword over here, that means there's going to be a separate memory location allocated for just that object. And look ahead. You guys now maybe you're wondering, back in your first year, why do we have, if the person here is always the same as the person here, why do we have to write it twice? Maybe anybody wondering about it? It's because in general, the class, the name over here, does not necessarily have to be the same as this one over here. When they are different, that means you're dealing with inheritance, which we will talk about thoroughly after the reading week. In general, you just remember, this does not have to be exactly as this. It does not have to be. But for now, they will be. Okay. Okay, the only thing I want to do, just to make it complete, I want to just do this thing over here. If I say, oh, how do you compare addresses between two objects? What operator would you use? Greater than? Or? Equal, thank you. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of expression playing over here. Okay, I want you to look at these two. Line number 12 and line number 13. Can you tell me what's going to be the output for each one of them? How about, yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's exactly what you're thinking. Yes, that would be right. But let's double check just to be sure. Yeah, we got false for this line over here because Jim and Jonathan, they are different objects. And this one here, we're asking, is it the case that Jim and Jonathan are different objects? Yes, they are different objects. That's why it's true. All right, so think about this, okay? And we have the corresponding assertions you will have to know how to write in JUnits. That's something I'll get into. What I want to do now is to move a little bit further about constructor, okay? Here's this. For default constructor, it's always the case that they don't take any input, but it's not good. When I create a person, I want to take their weights and heights, let's say. So what I would do is like this. Public, and then person, the same name as the class. And let's say double. Let's put the weight first. Let me say new weights. I deliberately choose a different name from this one. I deliberately do that. Double, new, height. Do you guys see anything that's going wrong here? Oh, of course, I haven't implemented the constructor yet, but that's not the issue. Is there any compilation error in the project? Do you see on the tab? Is there any red cross? There is. Not the same. Not in the person class. The person class seems to be fine. In this class over here, it says like the new person default constructor, which I said it would be available, doesn't seem to be valid anymore. As soon as I introduce this constructor over here. Can anybody try to explain why? What was really happening over here? Okay, very good. So here's the principle. I'll try to summarize maybe visually as well. When there is no default constructor, sorry, let me say it again. When there is no constructor defined in your class, the default constructor is there implicitly, which is what we saw. As soon as you introduce at least one constructor, in that way, default constructor is discarded. If you want default constructor yourself, you got to introduce it explicitly. So let me show to you. And then I will fix the code as well. This actually is a very important detail if you program in Java. Okay, let me show to you. Two scenarios. Let's say scenario number one. Let's say over here, if you have, let's say, class, let's not worry about public. Person over here, and let's say you got your attributes over here, let's say. Let's say that's it, nothing else. In this way, the default constructor is available implicitly, which will just set all the attributes to be default value. Scenario number two. Let's say we still have our class over here that's person. Okay, and then we still have our attributes, weights and heights. Okay, and we chose to actually introduce that person constructor, which will take, the weights and also the height, right? As soon as we have this, the default constructor is gone. It's not there anymore, not even implicitly. So now in this case, default constructor not available anymore. Okay, just not there. Just remember these two scenarios. Oh, let me show you. If I really want it, I can still put it there. Let me put it there. What I can do is, let me just go back to the person class. Oh, you know what? Let me, that's okay. So I would say public person. So that's the default constructor I need to declare over here. Okay? As soon as I do that, everything's good. So guys, is it clear what's going on here? Yes. You mean the signature for constructor? Or yes, I think yeah. For the signature, I'll try to talk about it maybe a little bit later. I think whenever you declare constructor accessor mutator, the signature is about input. You want to pass to the method to call that. Mm-hmm. Are you more asking about the general rule about how to? Mm-hmm. Two over here. We got two. Mm-hmm. No, you wouldn't give me. So let's say this. You can see are you asking about if there's some unused constructor, would it be an error? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so not giving me an error because we're accessing a default constructor that we didn't declare.
Yeah, okay, got it. I got what you mean. So here in the person class right now, we got two versions of the constructor. Number one, default, and number two, the one with the input. But if you look at the tester over here, we are only using the default version, but there's no error. So once you declare something in the model class, it is not an error if you don't use everything you declare over there. It's kind of up to you. However, you cannot use anything that's not declared in the model. Right? Alrighty, and let's now talk about, let me put some definition over here, and then I think we should really do some trial attendance check, at least for today, a bit. Don't worry, we're still in control of time. Okay, this one here, what should I do? Any suggestion? You're using this keyword, right? So I think that, yeah, you may use this, but I think in this case, let me make it clear here. So I chose a name that's exactly different from the attribute name. So we don't need this. Okay, so maybe you are talking about the weights. It's assigned to new weight. Yeah, so I would say, I'll just say Y over here. New weight is assigned to weight. It's not going to work. Right? If I swap the order of the assignment, is it going to work? No. But think about it. If you got trouble, reach out to me. That's some extra exercise you want to think about. And then the height is new. One thing that's really nice about using an IDE like an Eclipse, not just Eclipse, but for all the IDE, if I move my mouse over the weights over here, it will highlight what it's really referring to. You can see the weight is really referring to this particular attributes. That means I want to change the value of the attributes by, if I move the mouse over new heights, it's referring to the parameter over here. Right? That's kind of nice. All right, so that's about the constructor over here. The next step will be to really write some test case and then also to do a little bit tracing. I'll do that. But for now, why don't we take 1 minute or two, taking an attendance trial one, okay? If you guys can just get your iClicker ready, and then I believe from my side, I would just have the starter class, I believe. And then I can also, I do have some very dumb question for you to answer over here. Poll, multiple choice. And select. So I believe if you join the class, you should be able to see this question over here. Okay, just go, yeah. That says I'm in the LaSalle building, not the life science building. Interesting. Let me try again. That's kind of interesting. Thank you for letting me know. That's why it should be trialed. Let me do the following. That's interesting. Very interesting. So what I would do is I'm going to exit from this one here. And then I'm going to do it again. Let me try one more time. Okay, 2030. Let me start the class right now. The poll. How about now? Still say the same. Can any one of you just take a screenshot about the error and send to my email? Just one of you. Not every one of you. How about you do that for me? Yeah, just one. Okay, good. Yeah, I think let me contact the IT people to see what's going on, to see. Okay, good. Thank you. Let me just mention to you, because iClicker is really some new thing I'm trying. Maybe there's a design flaw of that. So let's talk about possibility. If iClicker can work, that'll be nice. If it doesn't work, I think that if every time we got about this much attendance, I really want to give you guys bonus by coming to classes. What we can do, I can maybe ask a TA whenever I need to take attendance, ask the TA to go around, take your signature, manually. That might be good. That's really reliable. And then I will take attendance that way too. That can work too. Of course, in the worst case, of course, I may have to cancel the policy within 2 weeks, but I really don't want to. We'll see. Okay, but let me ask the IT people. Thank you guys for trying. Let's see what happened on Wednesday. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, let me close this and then I'll go back. I would say if every time the attendance is about this, I think it's very comfortable. We can definitely do that. That might be good. So that will give you hints. If you see the TA that's here, that means attendance will be taken for that course, right? Okay, thank you so much for letting me know, but I think now we should go back to the Eclipse. Awesome. Okay, what we just saw was the default constructor and some, it's called the overloaded constructor. You will see the term in the slides as well. Whenever we talk about overloading in Java, that means the same method name, but we give different input in the list. There will be some exercise we can do together in the slide, maybe next time. What I want to do now is to show you another version of the tester. This one here, we are relying on outputting something to the console. We are relying on our eyes to check if the output makes sense. That's not really the good way to go, because if things get more complicated, you don't want to do things manually. Automation is the solution. What would be the automated way to do this? JUnit test. Okay, let's see how to do that. So I will right click on the JUnit tests over here, and then I will say new JUnit test case. That one's gonna create a class. And please make sure JUnit 4, okay? And I would just call that maybe tests, something like that. And I would say finish. And for the very first time, it's gonna add to the library. Okay, this one here. I will talk about what this guy here really means later. But for now, just remember, whenever you want to create any JUnit test yourself, remember you must put this particular tag. It's really important. A method without this tag over here is just a normal method. It wouldn't be included in the testing report. You must make sure you put this guy here. Just make sure. Okay, so let's now do let me just show you how we may do that. Okay, I'm just gonna copy this just to show to you the correspondence between the two. One, copy that, and then I'm gonna put it here. Okay, everything still compiles. However, this is actually not so good. I'll show you why. First of all, how do I run a test? If I right click on that, I'm gonna say run as JUnit test. Green bar. You might think that's good, right? Let me show to you why it's rubbish. I'll show you why. What if I do, we said before this one here, let me just make the point over here. We said before this guy here over here should be false, right? What if I say it should be equal to true? That should be false, right? That's actually making something that doesn't make sense. If I say run the test again, oh, let me just do it again. Beg your pardon. Yeah, it still gives me a green bar. It seems like if I do something that's correct, it gives me a green bar. If I try to assert something that's not exactly right, because it should be false, it also gives me a green bar. That means it's useless. Right? So we are not really using the JUnit test the right way by directly copy and pasting what we had in the console tester. That's the point I'm trying to make. Sorry, did you want to say something? Yeah.
I was just going to mention it's because you need to put what the correct answer should be.
Absolutely. So what we should do instead in JUnit test is put the so-called assertions. So guys, just understand what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to show to you, if you try to do system.out_print line, and expecting the red bar or green bar will actually change accordingly, it's not going to be the case. That's the main point I'm trying to make. Okay? What we should do instead, that's why you see in that diagram there, I say in principle, you should not put any system out of print line statement in your JUnit test, only in the console tester. What we should do instead, let me write it from scratch instead. Okay? We cannot really, as I said before, you cannot really say Jim address is exactly equal to a certain value. You cannot do that. The absolute value cannot be compared directly. Maybe possible in C. Even in C, that's the bad practice. You never want to work with the absolute value for the memory address. So what we can do instead is to say, Jim and Jonathan, they should have different addresses. So what I can do is, I show you different possibility. Assert true. So this is our assertion. And whatever I put inside the parentheses should be some Boolean expression that will evaluate the true. So for example, I can say Jim equals Jonathan. That one apparently is actually false, right? So I can do not equal to. Remember we said before, system out of the print line, Jim not equal to Jonathan will be true. So that means this expression here will evaluate the true, which is okay for assert true. Everybody following? I hope. Okay. If that's already a little bit getting your mind a little bit twisted, speak to me. Okay. I can do another one called assert false. This assertion is expecting the opposite. Whatever you put over here should really evaluate to false, which means I can just get that. Let me try again. Launch that. Green bar. All right. What if I say not equal to, just make sure I should really get a red bar. Otherwise, I'm still doing something that's rubbish, right? Awesome, right? So guys, playing with this a little bit, I think that's going to be strengthening your understanding. There is another thing I can do. Assert same. In JUnit's same over here, we're asking whether or not Jim and Jonathan store the same address. Okay, I'll write it down. Do Jim and Jonathan store the same address? Okay, and Jim and Jonathan. Well, Jonathan and Jim, doesn't matter. You need two things over there. Okay, and is it possible to say they are not the same? Yes. Actually, to be more precise, this one over here is actually going to fail. This one over here is going to pass. So for now, I'm just going to put this one into comments just for now. Right? This one is going to fail. Sorry, this one is going to pass. Because Jim and Jonathan, they are not the same address. So if I launch the program, I got green bar. And for now, I'm just going to uncomment that. Am I going to fail? Yes. If I try that, I'm going to fail. There we go. Okay? And if you actually try to look a little bit over here, the failure trace, it tells you exactly where things actually fail. Okay? If you click on that, it tells you it's failing this line specifically. All right? Let me just put it back, right? Because we want to get a green bar ultimately. Did you have a question? Yes. It's a very good question. The question was, what's the difference between assert same and assert equals? Assert same, well, not same here, are only comparing addresses. We're asking whether or not Jim and Jonathan store the same address, like what I said over there, right? Assert equals is much more complicated. So I would say for now, don't worry. We'll revisit this about assert equals in about week number 4 or so. There's a whole story to tell about equals. Okay. Yes? Yes, yes, very good. I think this one here is not really showing that pattern. Okay, you can see assert true, the first one, you have only one thing to put over here. That means whatever expression you put here must be a Boolean, number one. Number two, it must evaluate to true. Otherwise, the assertion will fail. The second one over here is the opposite. It's going to evaluate whatever that's inside over here at the runtime. If evaluate to false, it's going to pass because it's a false. If evaluate to true, it's going to fail because it's asserting false, right? And what you're talking about to see the expected and actual, that's something we'll see when we get to the get BMI to compare the number. We'll get there. Yeah. Guys, any questions? We got about 5 minutes. I think I can make use of that to do a little bit more, but I'm gonna definitely end the class in time. But question?
So for JUnit tests, is there any way to actually indicate which test it fails?
Yes, we will. It will. The question was, is JUnit test gonna, JUnit framework, the report gonna indicate which test failed? Very good question. So if you double click on the tab and go back to the package explorer, you can see we are currently running, sorry, it's a bit small, but if you look at your Eclipse, it's showing that you're running this particular class under which you got only one test at the moment. As you introduce more, it will give me a series of test cases there. Whatever that failed, it will show you some mark. You will, yes. Good. Okay, let me do a little bit more over here, if I may. I want to do, I got about 5 minutes. Let me do this quickly, okay? Let's do a little tracing over here. Let's see exactly what's happening over here. We got our person class, and we got two attributes. We got person default constructor. We got that constructor over there. And I deliberately don't use any this keyword. I will do that on Wednesday. We got new weights, which is different from the weights, the name. And also new height, different from height. So we got our JUnit test. We got our console application, right? We put everything together. I want to trace together with you about these two lines quickly. Okay. Let's do the first line. This line over here, when we execute it, is going to do three things. Number one, it's going to allocate some memory because it's a new keyword. So that means somewhere in the memory, let's say this is the memory over here, and then that one there is actually going to call the person constructor, which is over here, right? That's the one with the two parameters, two input. 72 is going to replace every occurrence of the new weights. 181 is going to replace every occurrence of the new heights. Are you guys okay with that? To see how the method is executed, right? And then, so what it is going to do, we have a weights attributes, we have a height attribute over here. Weight is going to be 72. The height is going to be 1.81. That's the first step. Just create the objects. And of course, every object in the memory must have some address. Let me make it up. 06, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just some address. The second step is going to declare this particular so-called reference variable. Reference variable simply means the gym over here is going to store the address of some person objects. If it doesn't store anything, it's going to be null, right? Right. So the second step is going to declare gym as a placeholder for address. Oh, sorry, that's a bad shape. There we go. That's gym. And then the third part is going to be the assignments over here. We're going to store the address of this into this placeholder. 06, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's at a more like a lower level, what's really happening over here. When we trace the OOP program, we don't need to go this low, but I'm gonna do that just one time. What about the next one? Let's do it quickly. I still have maybe 2 minutes. The next one is going to be, first of all, create this object over here. So this is the memory over here, and possibly that one has some address. Let's say 061321, just different address. And now we're calling the same constructor person, right? That means every occurrence of new weights is going to be replaced by 65 instead, right? Just instantiating the parameter into different value. So that one there is going to be 65. And every occurrence of the new heights is going to be replaced by 1.67. I'm doing this 2 times on the same method because we're creating different objects, right? That's really important to see. And I'll put it down over here, 65, 1.67, and the weights and the heights. And also, second part over here, we declare that Jonathan variable over here. That one there is going to store this address, 061321. That's really what's happening at the hardware level. So now, if you want to compare, let's say this line over here. When I say Jim is not equal to Jonathan, Jim is storing this address. Jonathan is storing this address. Are these 2 addresses the same? No, so that's why it's false. I would say kind of it's nice to know exactly this layout over here at the low level. But starting from Wednesday, we're going to trace in a high level way, just more efficient. Okay? Do you guys have any more questions for me? Everybody happy? Awesome. Thank you so much for showing up in time. I'll see you on Wednesday. Take care.